The airlock opened, and that's when I knew we'd already lost something we couldn't get back. We'd been tracking the generation ship for 3 months. The Persephone. She was drifting exactly where the old chart said she'd be, right at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, her destination. 10,000 years overdue. Her hull was scored with micrometeorite impacts, layered with the kind of cosmic dust you only get from drifting through deep space for millennia. Every scanner we had confirmed it. This ship had been traveling since before recorded human history. But when we boarded her, the crew was waiting for us in the reception bay, dressed in clean uniforms, their hair still wet from morning showers. They looked confused. Annoyed, even. They wanted to know why a quarantine vessel had been sent to meet them when they'd only just departed Earth yesterday. Yesterday. The word sat in my chest like a stone. Captain Voss, the Persephone's commander, kept checking his watch. An old mechanical one, the kind they don't make anymore. He showed it to me. The date was correct. The time was correct. But the date was from 10,000 years ago. He insisted the chronometer was working perfectly. He insisted they'd left Earth's orbital dock 26 hours ago. He couldn't understand why we were looking at him like that. The rest of his crew, all 47 of them, said the same thing. Same date. Same departure window. They had no memory of anything beyond a single day of travel. Their logs confirmed it. Every single entry, written in different hands, with different linguistic quirks, all stopped exactly 26 hours after departure. But the ship's black box told a different story. It had recorded every second of 10,000 years. Slow, methodical, uninterrupted time. Engine burns. Course corrections. Hull degradation. All of it logged with perfect clarity, as if the ship itself had been awake the entire journey while the crew experienced only a day. I tried to explain it to Voss. I showed him the carbon dating on the hull samples. The geological surveys of Earth we'd brought, showing continental drift, the rise and fall of cities, the extinction events. He stared at the data like it was written in a language he'd never seen. Then he smiled. Not a happy smile. The kind of smile you give when you're trying very hard not to scream. He asked me if this was some kind of test. If the colony authority was running psychological evaluations before landfall. I told him no. I told him the colony authority didn't exist anymore. That the nation that had funded the Persephone didn't exist anymore. That the version of Earth he'd left behind was archaeological record now. He stopped smiling. One of the crew, a young engineer named Halton, started pulling up the ship's internal surveillance. She was looking for proof. Proof that they'd lived those 10,000 years and somehow forgotten. But the cameras showed nothing. Empty corridors. Dormant life support. The crew quarters untouched except for that first day. She found something else, though. Timestamps. The surveillance system had timestamps, and they didn't match the black box. According to the cameras, the crew had been moving through the ship for 26 hours. But according to the black box, the cameras themselves had been recording for 10,000 years. Both were right. That's when the fear started to change shape. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was something older. Halton began pulling data from the ship's reactor. The fuel consumption matched 10,000 years. The wear on the reactor shielding matched 10,000 years. But the reactor's internal clock, the one that couldn't be reset or tampered with, said 26 hours. She looked at me, and I saw it in her eyes. The understanding that reality wasn't broken. Reality was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. We just didn't know the rules. I contacted my ship. Told them to run a comparative analysis on the Persephone's quantum state. It took 6 hours. 6 hours of watching Voss and his crew sit in their pristine cafeteria, drinking coffee that should have been dust, talking in low voices about families they thought they'd left behind yesterday. Families that had been dead for 100 centuries. The analysis came back, and I wished it hadn't. The Persephone existed in two temporal states simultaneously. Outside the ship, 10,000 years had passed. Inside the ship, 26 hours had passed. Not as a perception. Not as a relativistic effect. As objective, measurable reality. The ship was a closed temporal loop, and the crew had been inside it the entire time, living the same day over and over without knowing, without remembering, while the universe aged around them. Except that wasn't quite right either. Because they weren't repeating the day. They were experiencing it as one continuous flow. It was the universe outside that had been moving wrong. Moving too fast. Like something had reached down and turned a dial, and only the Persephone had been left untouched. I asked the lead physicist on my crew if that was even possible. She told me it shouldn't be. But then she showed me the readings from the space surrounding the ship. There was a field. Faint, almost undetectable, but it was there. A temporal boundary that had formed naturally, or been placed, around the Persephone at the moment of departure. And it was decaying. In another 60 hours, it would collapse completely. The crew would snap back into sync with the rest of the universe. They'd feel all 10,000 years at once, she said. Every second they hadn't lived. Every moment that had been held back. She didn't know what that would do to a human mind, but she didn't think it would be survivable. Voss overheard. He didn't say anything. He just walked back to his quarters and locked the door. I could hear him through the hull, talking to someone. Praying, maybe. Or apologizing. Halton asked if we could extend the field. Reinforce it. Keep them inside the loop. I told her we didn't even know what was generating it. We didn't have the technology to manipulate something like that. She asked if we could evacuate them. Bring them onto our ship before the collapse. I didn't answer, because I didn't know. I didn't know if the field would follow them. If they'd bring the loop with them and trap us inside it too. Or if leaving the ship would trigger the collapse immediately. We were making decisions about forces we didn't understand, and every choice felt like the wrong one. Then one of the crew, an older woman named Dr. Immune, called me to the observation deck. She'd been quiet the whole time, just watching through the viewport. She told me she'd done this before. Not this exactly, but something like it. She'd been part of a deep-time research project before joining the Persephone. Studying closed time-like curves. Theoretical models of isolated temporal structures. She said the math had always suggested it was possible for a region of spacetime to decouple from the rest of the universe under certain conditions. But the conditions required were so specific, so precise, that it should never happen naturally. She looked at me, and I saw something in her expression I didn't want to see. She said the Persephone's trajectory had been chosen for a reason. The specific vector. The specific speed. The exact moment of departure. Someone had known. Someone had calculated this. They'd sent the ship into a region of space where the temporal fabric was already thin, already prone to shearing. And they'd done it on purpose. I asked her why. Why would anyone do that? She told me the Persephone wasn't a colony ship. Not really. It was an experiment. A test to see if humans could be isolated from time itself. To see what would happen if you took a piece of humanity and removed it from the flow of history. And now, 10,000 years later, we had the answer. I wanted to call her insane. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. But I couldn't. Because everything fit. The mission parameters. The crew selection. The specific systems that had been included on the ship, systems that made no sense for a colony vessel but perfect sense for a long-term isolation study. We were the result. The end point of the experiment. We'd been sent to observe what happened when the loop finally collapsed. Voss came back out of his quarters. He'd heard everything. He asked Dr. Immune if there was a way to stop it. She said no. The field was always going to decay. That was part of the design. I asked her what we were supposed to do. She smiled, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. She said we were supposed to watch. The collapse happened 38 hours later. We evacuated our crew back to our ship and held position 10,000 kilometers out. The Persephone just hung there in the dark, lights still on, crew still moving inside. Then the field fell. There was no sound. No light. The ship didn't explode. It just stopped. Every system went dark simultaneously. We sent probes. Boarded again in full environmental suits. The crew was still there. Still in their uniforms. Still standing in the same places they'd been when the field collapsed. But they weren't alive anymore. They weren't dead either. They were something else. Frozen, but not in time. Frozen in the experience of time. Every cell in their bodies had tried to process 10,000 years of existence in a single instant, and it had simply stopped them. Locked them in place. Their expressions were still confused. Still afraid. Still human. We recovered the logs. All of them. Including the classified ones we found in Dr. Immune's personal files. She'd known from the beginning. They all had, on some level. The Persephone had been a sacrifice. A way to answer a question humanity had been too afraid to ask: what happens when you step outside the universe's flow and try to come back in? Now we knew. And we knew something else too. Because when we analyzed the field's decay pattern, we found something that shouldn't have been there. A signal. Encoded in the collapse itself. A message, written in the language of spacetime, compressed into the final moments of the field's existence. It wasn't from the crew. It was from whatever had been holding them. The field hadn't formed naturally. It hadn't been engineered by humans. It had been placed there by something else. Something that had been watching the Persephone for 10,000 years, keeping it safe, keeping it separate, waiting to see what we would do when we found it. The message was simple. It was a question. It asked if we understood yet. If we'd learned what we were supposed to learn. I deleted the message. I filed a report saying the collapse had been a natural temporal anomaly. I recommended the Persephone be left in place as a memorial. But I kept a copy of that question. I look at it sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep. And I wonder if the experiment ever really ended. Or if we're all still inside it, living our 26 hours, while something outside watches the universe age around us, waiting to see what we'll do when our own field finally falls.